Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to the season finale of season 9 of Behind Your Eyes. And the wonderful Kezia is my guest here. So, if you would like to introduce yourself to everyone.
Thank you for having me here today. Like she said, my name is Kezia, and I am a holistic spiritual coach. I work out of Detroit, Michigan. And officially, I'm a holistic spiritual coach, but I also kind of think of myself as a trauma-informed mystic. So, because a lot of the work that I do is reflective of my journey of healing from a lot of mental health issues. And so, and I'm also a deeply spiritual person. And so I think that kind of has a mystic edge to it. And I've kind of wed that with like a therapeutic side. So
yeah, it's hard to define it, right? I'm totally there with you.
Yes. Yeah.
I will get into that more a bit later, but I always start with sincere. How are you doing?
I am doing well. My life is a little bit in a well, not a little bit, it's a lot in a transition mode right now because I found out 2 weeks ago that I'm going to my partner and his 2 children are actually going to be moving into my house due to a change in their situation. And so it was a thing that we had thought about doing, down the road, but it's like very sudden. So I'm like fixing my basement and whatever. So it's a good change, but I also feel like my life is just changing in a big way right now.
Yeah, it's a change that you thought would happen later, and now you're like, oh, it's already here.
Yeah. But I think it will be a gift. I think it will be good for the kids to be in a more settled environment from where they've been. And anyways, I feel grateful for it. And I'm also just like moving with the flow. I think maybe the eclipses had something to do with it. They brought some fast change into our lives.
And you've mentioned in your biography that you sent to me that you had to reinvent yourself more than once. So I would love to know a bit more about that.
So yes, I have I have changed careers 3 times. I think I've done real estate, I've been in the growth and marketing world, and now of course I'm a coach and a healer and a psychic reader. So before that, through well, I don't know, more than 3 times, I guess. I also spent 2 years doing permaculture gardening. And that was really lovely and actually deeply nourishing to my spiritual side because I was so in touch with the earth and because I was using a method of gardening that was so organic, working with native plants, working with what was organic to the land that I was working on. So that was actually very nourishing to me as a whole person. So vocationally, I've reinvented myself, and also in my internal journey, I grew up in a very conservative Christian religion, almost a cultish type of sect. It was very conservative and very insular.
Yeah, and very restricting, probably.
Yes. And I grew up very devout. I was a very sincere child and very, like I wanted connection with God. I mean, this the thing that still drives my spirituality, connection with the divine, and so even as a child, like this was the way I was taught to connect with God, the Christian God. And so I was very devout and very sincere in my devotion to that faith. And as I grew and as I came into my own as an adult, starting to see some of the things that I'm like, this is harmful to me, harmful to human beings around me. That started raising questions to the confusion of that. But the shift from, that deep devotion to the Christian religion to a much more open way of life and of seeing the world, a much greater, broader connection to the divine, and a deeper respect for the variety of ways that that humans of all sorts have connected to the divine, whether it's through earth earth-based practices, whether it's through a formal religion, which I still think there are people who genuinely, deeply, sincerely find that to be their highest form of spiritual connection, is through religion. For many people, that works, and for many people, it doesn't work. And so it's embracing the variety of the ways that we enter the spiritual world.
Knowing that there's not just one way that's so-called the right way to do it.
Yeah, and so I think that was a huge migration because for me, my spirituality had been, in a church culture often like this is your social circle, this is your family, this is your, even many of my professional acquaintances had been formed within that community, and so really emerging from that was a total reworking of myself and my identity as I understood it and my way of being in the world. So yes, I feel like on multiple levels, I have had to rediscover my path forward in life.
And maybe even rediscover like who you truly genuinely are.
Yes, deepen into that. And throughout that time, I had a 4-year depression that I just, in a sense, you lose touch with yourself in a different way. You go through mental health struggles. This is a part of you, but it's also a part that becomes so overbearing to some of the other parts, you lose access to them. And so there was that theme also playing out through some of this time. And so having to discover, who I was before that deep season and who I was as I emerged from it.
Yeah, because there are two different people, right?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, I've been there, and it's a hard struggle, but it's also a very confrontational struggle, of course, because you have to deal with things that you actually don't really want to poke into.
Yes. Yeah. That was the thing. Like I had to come face to face with that realization of like, if I want to heal, if I ever want to not be in this state, there's some really deep work that I need to embrace.
Yeah, and I think that not wanting to be in that state anymore, that's at least for me my drive to become who I was meant to be, really.
Same.
Yeah.
There was this season of realizing I cannot do this any longer. So whatever it takes to emerge from this is what I'm going to do, whatever that is.
Yeah. Exactly. And for each, of course, that is different. But how did you get, on the other side?
Well, that was the season of the period where I was also leaving my community of faith. And because something that I realized was that, for the many years previously, I'd been trying to straddle both worlds, like trying to heal, trying to become more aware and more aligned with my values around social justice and around earth-based practices, but I was still trying to keep a foot in the religious community. I didn't want to lose that.
Right.
And I also, on a positive side, I also wanted to be like an influencer or a change maker within that community. I saw that there were things that like there were good people in this community that had good hearts, but they were also misguided in the ways they were trying to show up in the world. And I wanted to say, look, like I see your heart, and maybe there's a different way. Like, do you want to learn differently? And so I had
it makes sense because
trying to be a change maker.
Yeah, of course. You don't just want to fully deny everything you have known for all these years.
Yes. And so, but that was splitting my soul. It was very core to the depression. And also, I had grown up very codependent. I was very emotionally codependent, and so I had so few boundaries, and I wasn't wise in the way I invested even my physical and energetic resources. So I had also overextended myself and was reaching that edge of burnout from all my commitments to this nonprofit and that nonprofit and my community of faith and these people that looked to me for mentorship. And, I was so spread out, and it was all well motivated, but it was unsustainable.
Oh yeah, of course your intentions were pure. Yeah.
And so that led to this deep depression that I couldn't shake. And I had to to say, like, what would have to change in order for me to heal? What do I have to do differently from this point forward? And came to the conclusion that I could no longer stay in that community of faith. And ultimately, that because of the way those insular systems work, it can be a very painful and very very aggressive process to remove yourself from that. And so I was on the receiving end of some painful behavior from other people in that community, that eventually led to me just saying, I can't even stay in this city. So I ended up having to move. That's when I moved to Detroit. So I was just like, I can't even heal in this city because I'm still being like hounded by this community. And so I moved to Detroit at that point, and that was shortly before COVID. And then of course the world changed for everyone. So this huge season of upheaval. And but this is ultimately what led me to where I was now, that ability to turn towards myself in love and to say whatever it takes to heal, whatever it takes, and being willing to let go of something that I had loved so dearly and been so devoted to, and to say, this is no longer my path.
Yeah, that takes strength.
It is easily the hardest thing I've ever done. Even as a person who's survived like mental health struggles and sexual abuse and things like that, like actually leaving that community easily the hardest and most painful thing I've ever done.
Yeah, if it has been your basis and your foundation all of your life, that must be intensely difficult to leave. And then when you get the backlash from the people you trusted and have to remove yourself from your hometown, basically. How did you find the strength within yourself to like, okay, I trust me, I know what I'm doing, this is good for me? Where did you get that strength from?
Desperation. I mean, I had tried everything else in the previous, probably about 2 years. In the previous 2 years, I had become more, I had started going to therapy. I had started becoming more self-aware, and I tried to make so many small adjustments. Like I had started to work on having boundaries. I had started to work on being less codependent. So I started having more language. I started having more skills. I started trying to stick up for myself, but ultimately like nothing was, I tried all these tiny adjustments. I tried to adjust my life, and I tried that for 2 years and it still wasn't working. And so I was just like, I have done all the small reasonable changes that I know how to make. All the things that I've gotten advice, like try doing more of this, try doing less of this. I've done all those things, and nothing is shifting this depression that is just making it, feel impossible to live every single hour of every single day. And I just cannot keep this. And so it was that of just knowing that I had tried everything else and saying, whatever it takes. Yeah. Like, I want to live. I want to live. Yeah. Realizing that I was, having a living death. Each day was so full of darkness and intense numbness, but also pain, right? It's like,
yeah, depression is like weird, you feel a lot and nothing at the same time.
Yes, and it's so odd, and it's just human beings were not made to live like that. And I reached that point where I said, like, I want to live. Whatever becoming alive means for me, I want to find my way back towards life.
And do you remember a moment where you felt that sense of aliveness again, or light again?
No, it was very slow and very subtle for me.
Yeah, gradually.
I can't think of a moment where I felt a shift inside myself. I can think of moments where, like, on a day I would suddenly look back and realize it's better than it was 2 months ago.
Yeah.
It's like the lighting was so gradual. And I would get to points along the way where I'd realize I'm a little better. It's not quite so hard to wake up each morning.
It's not so heavy,
it's not quite so hard to accomplish my work responsibilities. I'm not like grinding my gears quite so hard trying to make progress. So I think there were moments where I had this like slight awareness of like, oh, I'm better now than I was.
Yeah, for me personally, it was like I just got up a bit earlier in the morning. Before I wouldn't even get up in the morning. I will, I would just get up somewhere in noon to just like face another day. But where you get up a bit earlier, like, oh, I actually want to experience more of this day.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it's those tiny things that make the difference.
It's so subtle. It's so subtle. And I would find, I would think, oh, I think I'm better now. And then like, 4 months down the road, I would realize, oh, I'm even better now. Like I thought I was better then, but I'm even better now. So
Well done. Well done to you.
Thank you. And to you. And to you.
Thank you. And I would love to know, like in that whole journey, healing and spiritual journey, where did you realize that you have psychic abilities?
So I always had, I think that happened for me in the disentangling of my understanding of religion from my understanding of spirituality. So I think I'd always had a very warm or relational sense of presence with the divine. And that had always been like respected in the religious community, but also viewed with a little bit of suspicion or fear, because it was a very conservative community, and so it was all about like rules and belief system and that kind of stuff. And the fact that I had more of a sentient, like relational connection with the divine, people thought it was cool, but they also were always afraid of it, and they always they kind of viewed it as a negative.
Bit apprehensive of that connection.
They both were drawn towards it, and they also like they also pushed away because of it. So that was a very interesting dynamic that I had lived with my entire religious setting. And then when I emerged from that, I thought one of the difficult things was that I was like, do I have to give up my connection with God? Like I wasn't sure how spirituality worked outside of religion, since that had been my only experience of spirituality. And so as I slowly began to come back to health and slowly was dealing with the trauma and the loss and like processing the grief of my exit from religion, I realized, no, there's still something, there's still a live connection with the divine in me. How do I relate to it now? So I realized, okay, I have a spirituality that's independent of my religion. So as I started to have that sense of spirituality, and it was like, okay, well, this connection is no longer bound by a singular God or a singular understanding of who God is or how God might happen to be. So that gave me a chance to explore, and then it just felt natural. Like as soon as I felt that sense of freedom, so I think that was kind of more of a clear moment for me. Like once I had that sense of freedom, I was like, oh, my connection with the divine exists outside of Christianity. And I was kind of like, oh, I can do anything with this.
Hallelujah, almost.
Oh my goodness, yes. And so at that point, it just felt really natural to me to explore other forms of spirituality. So I visited, there was a group that would meet and do Buddhist meditations every Sunday in the neighborhood that I was living with at the time. So I was just like, I'll go down and I'll sit with them in there and I'll just see what I can learn, see how I can grow, see what's in this for me. And a couple months later, I saw this thing on Facebook where a tarot class was being advertised. And so I was like, of course, tarot had been like demonized like witchcraft in my in my past. And I was just like, it's probably not, it's probably not that. I can just go check it out. So I took these tarot classes and it turned out to be really lovely. And it felt almost like when I started interacting with the tarot, it was like I already understood, like I understood them at a very deep level, and was just like, oh, I just have to learn the language of them. I just have to learn how the cards work, like the science side of it. But I already feel energetically how these cards work. So that was a big shift for me, where I was like, oh, there's just so many beautiful ways to connect with the divine. And tarot was my introduction to probably what we would call the more psychic senses.
Right.
Since then, I've continued to grow and expand in those. But yeah, that just happened organically in the process of untangling religion from spirituality.
And well, there's another topic that I would love to discuss with you. I had a discussion with a friend recently, and we talked about spiritual burnout, and also when spirituality is used more as an escape, where you almost like overuse it and be like, oh, if only I meditate enough and say enough affirmations, and then I will be okay. So when is spirituality to you like a handy, like a tool that can actually help you? And when is it something that you can escape in to avoid what you want to feel, what you need to feel?
I love that you're asking this question. This is so insightful. And yes, spiritual bypassing is so common. You bypass your trauma, you bypass your pain. You don't actually deal with it. You use, well, I'm just trusting spirit, or I'm just trusting, however. It's like, well, so this is actually why the trauma informed part of my practice is so important to me, because I think that a healthy spirituality is actually all about connection. And it's connection internally, it's integration, and then it's also connection with the beyond. So sometimes we try to skip self-connection and just connect with the spiritual. We outsource our power.
We give our power away, but then to another source we think is healthy.
And yet ultimately the most powerful is when we are standing in our own power, but also acknowledging that, as human beings, we are wired for connection and for community. So whether this is we share power with other people in a healthy way, like interdependence, or as part of community, we all know that a community is more powerful than any single individual. And when we stand in our power, but we also reach out to powers that are greater or beyond who we are, that strengthens our light. Instead of outsourcing it or giving it away. So I find that our spirituality as human beings is actually the part of us that is connective. So spirituality connects us to ourselves and us to what's beyond us. And it looks different for different people, because when our spirituality is at work, it usually connects with other parts of us that are most available for connection. So what this looks like is there are some people who are maybe like have had a lot of emotional trauma, but they're like super smart, and it's almost like their safe place has been in their heads, and particularly possibly like in their field of study or whatever. So when you have a person who's like maybe very intelligent in mathematics, and although they rarely express emotions, if you get them to talk about mathematics, they're like, this is amazing. The whole world runs off of numbers, and like the key to the universe is in mathematics. And you see a side of them kind of light up and become present that's not there any other time. That's their spirituality connecting through their mental faculty. Because their mind is their safe place. So their mind is what feels secure and what is available for the spirituality to move through. And so they get their sense of awe, reverence, joy, peace, things that we associate with spirituality. They get those through their mind. Their spirituality works through their mind to give them those things that are necessary for our human happiness, like awe and reverence and connection. For people who maybe are very dissociated mentally or emotionally, but they're marathoners, and they say, I feel most alive when I'm running. Okay, that's the spirituality connecting to the unseen, to what is beyond us through their body. They may not be able to explain it. They may just say, well, my body likes running, or I like the way I look when I work out, or whatever. But they're getting some type of sense of like transcendence or the beyond that's working. So there's the spirituality can almost like shape shift So it's whatever part of us is most available for connection, the spiritual self is going to move through that to give us connection to the beyond. So
yeah, that's so fascinating. And do you think that is linked also with purpose?
I think it is for people who have the ability to bring consciousness to that.
Right.
So I think ourselves are very, like, our humanity is very wired for survival. And so and our soul often doesn't push us or pressure us. Like, our soul is not manipulative or abusive to us.
Yeah.
So our soul doesn't pressure us to do things before we're ready to. When we feel pressure from soul, it's actually because we're ready to take the step.
Right.
In the same way that I would say, like, I don't want to speak for your story, but just a little bit that we've talked, our soul didn't push us to make the biggest changes in our lives until there was something in us that was ready to say, no more of this, whatever it takes.
Yeah, to me,
because
I think
we suffered for a long time before that, right? We suffered and we suffered and we suffered and we tried to make the best because we weren't ready to change. And finally, we got to a point where something in us was like, I'm ready. And then soul said, okay, you're going to feel this now. You're gonna feel this so intensely, and you're gonna get that final push to help you make these big changes.
Yeah.
So I think for people who almost like want their life to remain more in control or more understandable or to make more sense, or who still are very connected to, like, maybe family pressures or structure or societal structures or workplaces, they might not be ready to consider my soul purpose, my calling. Why did I decide to embody here on earth? And so in that case, the spirituality will just keep offering them joy, connection, all. It'll keep giving them the kindness of those experiences, without maybe like prompting them to something greater until they're ready to see it.
Until they're ready and open to or that more, maybe.
And so I think this is actually why you see many people have huge transitions around, like, childbirth or the death of a loved one, because those are things that happen in their physical 3D lives that also crack open that spiritual self. And so often life or soul waits for something in our 3D world when we're caught up in our 3D material world. Often soul is patient. Soul waits for something to happen in our 3D world that's going to bring us that awareness of, like, oh, maybe there's more.
Like for that to happen. And do you have a favorite way, I would almost like to say, for connecting with spirit or the universe, how you want to call it?
For me, I do have a deep connection with the earth. So especially when it's warm, we have half a year of winter here, but I usually go barefoot when I'm outside. If I'm in my housing area, obviously if I'm out and about, I wear shoes, but like, even just being barefoot and having this mindfulness of, like, I came from the earth, I'm connected to the earth. I have a lot of house plants, and there's something of spirit that seems to speak to me and to nourish me through that. And I also work pretty deeply with, like, I have an altar and a shrine. I work with some ancestral helping spirits pretty deeply. And so I think those probably, my ancestral shrine, and then some earth-based practices. Those are probably my primary ways, although I explore many other ways.
Because you mentioned to me you're an organic gardener as well, so that comes, that's the connection with Mother Earth again.
And also, that part is part of what keeps me close to my body.
Because
so it's not the bypassing. Like, I could stand in front of my altar and, like, have this very, like energetic or outside of myself experience, but it is my desire to be fully embodied as a human. And so I and because of what you said earlier, like, that whole religious bypassing, spiritual bypassing is so prevalent. And I did that for so many years. Part of my dissociation and part of my ill health was because I was in a religious framework where it was all about the mind and the brain, and I was so disconnected from my body. And so I don't ever want to practice my spirituality in that way again.
Yeah.
You know, I want to be deeply embodied. And so I think of myself as a tree. It's like, I want my roots always to be like growing deeper and deeper and deeper into the earth. I want to inhabit my body more and more fully and healthily and joyfully. And then I also want to continue reaching and exploring. I believe there is infinite beauty and infinite light that we can draw down from from the beyond into our daily world, which also is what our world needs, especially right now, right?
Oh yeah.
And so I feel like the deeper my roots are, the more fully embodied I am, the more powerfully I'm going to radiate the light and the grace and the beauty that I bring in from the beyond. And so it's so important for me to be rooted in my body form. So I think having that earth connection and prioritizing that, while I also am opening to the ancestral realms and the, you know, the upper realms with teachers and guides and so forth, is so important.
Yeah, it's like almost like a balance between mindfulness and bodyfulness.
Yeah. Yes, I love that word. I love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because we focus so much on the mind. I'm like, okay, we're one whole. Please don't forget our body. I mean, our body is smart and talking to us all day as well.
Yes, and the body is so wise. The body has so much wisdom.
Yeah. Well, my last question is also always the same, and that is, when are you at your happiest?
I am at my happiest either when I'm sitting with the earth, when I have my fingers in the soil. I planted garlic this morning. Because garlic is a 9-month crop, so it needs the winter, and then it matures in the early fall. So I planted my garlic this morning, and that brought me happiness. I still have dirt underneath my nails. and also when I am in communion with my helping spirits, but also especially so when I'm able to do that in communion with other people, whether this is a thing where there's like, I have friends over and we kind of make like a small community altar for ourselves while we hang out, or whether that's with my partner who also shares a very rich spirituality. There's something that is especially alive and especially happy in me when I have both it's because it's everything, right? It's my body connection and my connection with the above and my connection with other humans. When I can bring all three of those together, that is when I feel happiest and most alive.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for today and for this wonderful conversation, Kezia. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you.